What is going on, Sixers fans? Welcome back into another edition of Trust the Podcast. I am your host, Joe Tuman, as always, and wanted to come in here, do a pod for the first time in a while, really just focusing in on the Sixers. That was a staple of Trust the Podcast in the early years, but I feel like over the past year or two, I don't know, I've been taking more of a broad view at the NBA, still talking plenty of Sixers, but I haven't done a ton of Sixers-centric episodes. Want to change that up in 2026, and I thought, I'm snowed in here recording this on Sunday the 25th. Hope everybody's staying warm out there. Thought this was the perfect time to maybe dive in on the Sixers, take a look at what they've been doing recently, because they've been a ton of fun to watch this year, but they've had plenty of ups and downs. Over this past week, a lot has gone down. They had a great win over the Rockets on Thursday in overtime, but then lose by 3 to the Knicks yesterday. And those two games especially I thought were really indicative of where this team is, because all season they've been topsy-turvy. That's continued into 2026. They're 7-6 so far since the calendar turned. And that's reflective of, just how many close games they've been in this year. They're 7-9 in one-score games, 6-8 if you don't include 4-point finishes. But regardless, just under 500 in those close games, and they're constantly in the close games. They lead the NBA after the Houston game in overtime games played. They're 4-3 in overtime, so at least have a winning record there. But just every time it seems like they're turning a corner, or every time it seems like they've really, stumbled into some tough times, the switch flips one way or the other. They're just very up and down. They're 24-20, currently 6th in the Eastern Conference. After getting swept by the Cavaliers 2 weeks ago, they've kind of taken, at least for now, maybe they can get back into that upper echelon in the East, but they've kind of moved down into that second tier where, Cleveland and Toronto are now 3 to 4 wins ahead of the Sixers. Sixers are kind of closer to that play-in tier now, which I think can change, especially when we see the way guys like Joel Embiid have been playing lately. Tyrese Maxey continues to be excellent. The star power is certainly there for this Sixers team if they want to make a second half leap. But I wanted to just kind of take a look at their recent games, take a look at how they've been playing in 2026, and kind of assess where they're at right now. Kind of just give my take on it, because I haven't, like I said, I just haven't done a lot of that this season, and really the past 2 seasons. So just kind of wanted to break down what I've been seeing. And I think the first thing you have to mention right now with the Sixers is that Joel Embiid is starting to find himself again. Yesterday, 38 points, 11 rebounds against the Knicks, triple-double, 32, 15, and 10 against Houston on Thursday, and had a great game against Indiana on Monday as well. Missed the Phoenix game on a back-to-back on Tuesday. And if Joel Embiid is going to be this fluid on offense, this effective on offense as he's been in 2026, his numbers this month, he's putting up 28 points, 8 rebounds, shooting 54, 29, 88 splits, 8.5 free throw attempts a game. And over his last 4 games, he's starting to get that outside shot back again. He's starting to get his legs under him. 9 of 17 from 3-point range. I think that's really encouraging. I think that's exactly what the Sixers want to see from him right now. Athletically, he's starting to kind of get there, at least on offense. He had a couple monster slams coming in from the lane yesterday against the Knicks, and then in the Houston game, just to play 45 minutes, even in an overtime game, I think is just incredible. We never would have expected that even a month or two ago, when athletically he just didn't look up to snuff in the first couple months of this season. Really feels like he's now getting back into form. Defensively, obviously still not the same player, but I mentioned the rebounding. He's starting to get back to at least putting up a fight. I thought he was really excellent again in the Houston game, just to see him kind of match Alper and Şengün physically, and then defensively take him out of the game, along with what I thought was some really awesome help defense from Paul George in that game against Şengün. But Şengün had no points in fourth quarter and overtime of that game, and those two were just going at each other all game. And it was really encouraging to see Embiid step up to a challenge like that, and also limit a guy like that, because not that Şengün is this awesome athlete, but even a guy like Şengün, who has such intelligence near the basket, I think a month or two ago, even Embiid would have even struggled defensively against him. Now, yesterday in the Knicks game, we saw a guy like Mitchell Robinson come in, and he's obviously a lot more athletic than a guy like Şengün. He can get up and down the court a lot quicker. And I think Embiid, he struggled with that, and the Knicks dominated the Sixers on the board in that game, 64-46, I believe it was. But Embiid was still great in that game. He fouled Karl-Anthony Towns out of the game, and I think that's a big reason the Knicks actually found success yesterday against the Sixers. They were playing with a lot more pace, a lot more athleticism when Josh Hart and Robinson were in the game. It felt like the offense was a little more free flowing, where it's just kind of Brunson surrounded with guys who are trying to elevate him. Where Karl-Anthony Towns, I mean, I touched on in the All-Star pod I did with Chris, just hasn't been the same guy this season. I think he's held the Knicks back, and he was certainly holding them back when he was trying to guard Joel Embiid in that Knicks game yesterday. I mean, the Sixers in the third quarter, as they've done many times this season, kind of self-destructed, lost that third quarter 30-13, and Robinson did kind of limit Embiid for that quarter, but then Embiid in the fourth quarter I thought was a big part of them coming back into that game and going on a big run and only losing by 3 instead of double digits. Embiid just looks more confident at the basket. I think his finishing touch in the Knicks game yesterday really caught my eye. He's getting his touch back in a way I haven't seen in a while, and he's been doing that for the past week or two. Repeatedly, and if he's going to start making those floaters, those three-pointers again, in addition to getting to the foul line, in addition to just getting some dump-offs around the basket, that creates a whole new brand of offense for this Sixers game. I think him and Maxi's two-man game has been phenomenal lately. In the Houston game, they had some really nice possessions together. There was another nice possession late in that game that I thought was really crucial where Embiid kind of gave Maxey a dribble handoff, then screened Paul George open. Paul George hit a big shot. It was nice to see those three working in unison, but Maxey and Embiid especially, I think it's been very interesting because Maxey has still been the focal point of the offense lately, but they're getting back to that two-man game that they had when Embiid was kind of at the focal point of the offense. And I think that the fact that they found a way to make that work, make that mesh, is really, really encouraging. So Embiid, there's nothing guaranteed ever, just with his injury history, but he's been pretty healthy. I like that they're resting him in situations like the Phoenix back-to-back. But if he's going to be playing like this, it creates – a lot of people have said this, but it makes the Sixers a team nobody wants to see in the first round, especially when you see the way Maxey, VJ, and then some other guys I'll talk about here. I mean, Paul George, Oubre, I think they've all stepped up recently, and it might be one of the better starting fives of the Joel Embiid era. If you still want to call it the Embiid era, you could argue we're in the Maxey era, but Embiid's still on the team. So it's definitely one of the better lineups I've seen, and I just think he looks a lot healthier and a lot more confident than he did just a short month or two ago. So nothing but positivity for Embiid there. I don't know defensively if he's getting that athleticism, that elite, rim deterrence back, but if he's going to start fighting again like he was in that Houston game, I think that's going to help a lot. So that's obviously the biggest positive for the Sixers right now. And another positive that I did want to briefly highlight, like even with Embiid's up and down nature on the boards this season, the Sixers are still a dramatically improved rebounding team, and I think we're continuing to see that. The fact that they were able to stand up against Houston, compete on the boards, was really encouraging. Now, part of that was Steven Adams not playing in that game, but I thought guys like Barlow, guys like Paul George, and then of course Embiid really fought for possessions in that one, and it's a reason the Sixers are actually grabbing 27% of their offensive rebounds this year. That ranks them 8th in the league, and that's just a metric that I never would have thought the Sixers would have had. It's a reason Dominic Barlow just has to get converted to a standard contract. And I think it will happen, but it just seems like they're trying to. They just signed Charles Bassey to a 10-day contract so they can push that down the road another month or so. I would like to see them stop being cheap and just give Dominic Barlow his contract right now so he can, kind of just settle in. Now, obviously, he's going to get to continue playing for another couple weeks since they added Bassey on that 10-day deal. It was kind of a circumstance where if the Sixers didn't get to 15 players on the roster, then the two-way guys, Walker and Barlow, wouldn't be able to play until they were converted to standard contracts. Now that Bassey's on the roster for the next 10 days, Barlow and Walker can keep playing. But I hope they stop messing around with that and just take care of business, especially for Barlow, but really both of those players. I think both of those guys, rebounding-wise, have been essential. But the thing about Barlow is he also elevates this offense, makes the extra pass. He's a connective piece on the wing where maybe he's not racking up assists, but he's one of those hockey assist guys. I mean, he really is. I think he's really fit in well with this team. I think him and VJ bringing offensive – these are two guys who weren't on the team last year, and they've completely elevated the team with their offensive rebounding. VJ, I think that's an underrated part of his rookie season, is how impactful of a rebounder he's been. Even in some of these games where his shot isn't falling, he still plays with such effort. And I think everybody knows that about his defense, but I think his rebounding gets kind of overlooked, and I don't think it should, because I think that's been a really important part of why the Sixers have have elevated in that area. And if they're going to give themselves second chances, this offense is going to continue to put up a fight with any team. Now, they only rank 22nd in defensive rebounding. I think a big part of that is the Embiid of it all, where he's just not able to, at least the first half of the season. Maybe he's going to start to get there, but I'm not super confident. He's never been an elite rebounder anyway. But 22nd defensive boards, I think that's not going to improve too much. So I like that they're fighting on for the offensive glass, though. That really does change the dynamic of the team and can keep them in games like that Houston game, where, when you're playing lockdown defense on the best player, well, second best player on the court. I don't want to say he's better than Durant, but I would argue that Şengün is kind of the engine of that Rockets team, where we saw it. Durant put up 36 points. Sixers probably should have won in regulation because Maxey, if you watch that game, there was a goaltend that wasn't called at the end. The Sixers should have won, but then they took care of business in overtime. And it took the Rockets. The Rockets had a huge run in the fourth quarter. They were down big, so Durant was phenomenal. But I do think Şengün, not to go on a Rockets tangent, but I think he's kind of the engine that allows that offense to kind of all come together. Because if he's not impacting the game offensively at his highest level, then it kind of does become what we saw in the late stages of that Houston game, where it's kind of Durant or nothing. And I thought the Sixers' perimeter defense was great in a game like that. They forced 8 turnovers on Durant. They gave Amen Thompson some trouble. And obviously with Şengün, as I mentioned, struggling. So that might have been the best Sixers win of the season. And although it did go to overtime, it could have, but like I said, it shouldn't have gone to overtime. But then they took care of business once they got there. I would love to see more performances like that. But as I mentioned at the top, this team they lose a lot of close games. They're in a lot of close games. And I think defensively, a thing that gets overlooked, and I've started to notice, is although they're great at forcing turnovers, Maxey with his 8 steals on Monday, but VJ, Paul George, Maxey, just they're turning opponents over all the time. And I think that's awesome, and I think it's why the Sixers defense has elevated, where especially over last season, but really over the past couple of seasons on the perimeter. I think they've been excellent in that area, but I've continued to notice them, especially in January. They just kind of lose opponents, and opponents they shouldn't be losing. Like, good shooters consistently get open against this Sixers team. It seems like they just have rotational struggles all the time. We saw it in the Knicks game yesterday. If you watch that, Landry Shamet, former Sixer, got wide open on a corner 3 at a pivotal moment in a close game. Completely wide open, makes the 3, and we've seen that a lot in recent games. I wrote down a stat. There's 7 games in the month of January where the Sixers opponents have made 15 or more 3-pointers. They're 2-5 in those games, and that seems kind of logical. Like, if your opponent's going to make 15 threes, that is impressive. Sixers average on the season is only 12.7 threes given up a game, so if they're over the average, they're probably going to lose. I understand that, but when you look at the teams they're playing, kind of indicative of if you see a team that is even competent on the perimeter, the Sixers don't really, at least according to their record, aren't going to stand much of a chance. They've lost to Cleveland twice. They've lost to the Knicks, and then they gave up those 15-plus 3-pointers in the win over the Knicks at the beginning of January. They lost to Denver in that crazy game where Jalen Pickett and Peyton Watson were killing them. And then in the Suns game on Tuesday, the Suns had 4 guys off their bench score 12 or more points because they just kept getting open looks. Barlow and Quentin Grimes were just losing their man constantly in that game. I couldn't believe what I was seeing in that one. And the games in January where the Sixers haven't given up 15 3-pointers, it's against teams that don't shoot the rock well, like Orlando, like Toronto, Dallas, and then bad teams like Indiana and Washington. So to me, the fact that there's such a clear discrepancy of the level of opponent who's making these shots, there's nothing wrong with, good team comes in, they're good offensively. Like, of course you're going to have to deal with that, but if you can't get victories, if you can't take that part of their game away from them pretty much ever, that's not a recipe for success. Just because it's a team statistically is a good shooting team doesn't mean you can't take them out of the game. We've seen the Sixers certainly miss their shots in big games, so that's going to be something they have to clean up. And I don't know if that's a coaching thing, but the Sixers just seem to constantly get a little too aggressive. I'll see Dominic Barlow come in from the paint and try to double team an opponent in the lane, and then the shooter gets open. I see Quentin Grimes. He's a big culprit. He overplays defensively a lot, and that's in the perimeter. Like, he might try to come help Maxey or PG guarding their guy, and all of a sudden Colin Gillespie or Royce O'Neal, or in the Houston games Tari Easons maybe, or someone like that, gets wide open in the corner, and I forget who allowed. I think it was VJ actually, even who allowed Shamit yesterday to get that shot. But that's just I think the Sixers' biggest weakness right now to me is their perimeter defense. They're over helping on defense because I just think it's a theme that you've seen. The Cleveland games too. I didn't really mention them, but they killed the Sixers, especially in the first game, 133-107 finish. They killed the Sixers on the perimeter. So I think that's something the Sixers need to clean up. I don't know if that's a talent thing where, let's get a better perimeter defender, or if we have the right guys in place. Like, for the most part, I don't see Paul George doing that. I'm not saying never. I mean, guys are going to get beat, but I think it's mainly been like Barlow and Grimes and VJ, and those guys, two of them are pretty inexperienced. So I can give them the benefit of the doubt there. And it doesn't help when you have Embiid, who for most of this season, he's starting to get there a little bit, but he's also very exploitable defensively, especially in transition. So, you got to kind of give and take there. You're going to have to make do with Embiid. Bona can't play over and over again. But I do think the Sixers defense has to get better. And I don't have the perfect solution. I don't have that type of basketball mind, but I know what I'm watching, and I do think that is a huge issue. And the other thing I do think the Sixers have been plagued by a little bit in these recent games and a lot of these close games is I think both Paul George and VJ Edgecombe, as good as they've been, and I think they deserve a ton of praise for how good they've been, whether it's George coming off a disappointing injury-prone season, responding with being a very impactful starter this year, or VJ just coming into the league and being an awesome starter as a rookie. Both guys have been great, but I just think they're very much inconsistent shooters right now. I do think the Sixers, it's all on Maxey to make these clutch 3-point shots. VJ has done it a lot, but he's up and down. I mean, he had some rough stretches early this month, the Toronto and Cleveland games, those pair of back-to-backs, he really struggled. I wrote down he only had one game in the month of December where he had 3 or more turnovers. He's had 5 in January. And I think that's just indicative of offensively, he's just an up and down player, whether it's with the ball in his hands. There's one game he has 8 assists. The next game he has 5 turnovers. Like, it's been up and down for him. Or his 3-point shot. I mean, I didn't really notice him a ton offensively in the Houston or the New York game. That isn't to say he's not playing hard. As I mentioned earlier, I think he always plays hard. But this was part of his scouting report coming in, is that his finishing was up and down. I think VJ does try to play the hero a lot, and that might be part of just the fact that he came into the league, and that first game he was clutch. He made everything. I thought he really asserted himself. For example, this past week against Phoenix, 10 points in the first quarter. He was making some tough mid-range jumpers, but later in the game, it kind of wasn't falling for him as much. So I don't know. It's just a lot of pressure to put on a rookie who I think has been phenomenal. He's been great, but it's a lot of pressure for him to make a lot of big shots game in, game out, because as we've seen, one game he has it, the next game he's kind of still working through it. So the other thing he needs to stop doing too, he needs to stop trying to posterize people in crucial moments of the game. In the Denver game, he tried to make this big highlight reel dunk late. It wound up being a turnover. It helped Denver win that game. And then in the Houston game, he tried to do the same thing. The Sixers got a big turnover, seemed like the momentum was on their side, and then he was trying to make a highlight reel dunk with like a minute or so left in the game. Luckily, Houston turned it right back over to the Sixers, and that kind of led to that Maxey goaltending sequence. But I don't know. VJ seems to try and he's been doing this a lot throughout the season. Like, I feel like random moments he's just trying to pull out a highlight reel. And it was funny to me that he said he had no interest in doing the dunk contest, because some of these plays he brings out in these games makes me think otherwise. And there's nothing wrong with that. He absolutely has the athleticism to do it, but like, that's kind of the appeal of him as a scorer. But I don't know. I've seen him miss those shots, those highlight reel shots, more often than he's made them this season. And I think that it's just a rookie thing. I think he just has to develop the intelligence, the frame of mind to know when he can actually get away with that in a game versus like, let's just maybe take the mid-range jumper. Let's just try to get to the foul line. And I think that will come in time for him. And I mentioned Paul George. I think Paul George has been really good, but he's now only shooting 30% after a tough game yesterday against the Knicks. Didn't show up too much in the highlights yesterday. 30% in the month of January from 3-point range, only 2.4 free throws attempts, which is a little bit lower than his season total of 2.8. He's playing 32 minutes a game, and he's been healthy. He's only missed 3 games this month. So I'm all for Paul George continuing to be an important part of this team, but he's got to get his 3-point shot get back to where it's been this season. He's 37% on the season, so that's a lot more palatable than what he's been doing in the month of January. And we saw last year how inefficient of a shooter he was. So I hope he gets back to his season totals, because that's a guy who's going to help VJ. If VJ's having an off night, you got to count on Paul George. You got to lean on Paul George offensively. Paul George has been really good defensively. I thought he had some really crucial turnovers forced in that Houston game. He's so good at intercepting those passes, but he's also a capable perimeter defender. I mean, he couldn't stop Durant in that game, but I also trust him way more than, they had Maxey on Durant for a couple possessions. I was like, can we please change this up? So Paul George is still, I would say, the Sixers' most well-rounded defender. And 2.4 steals and blocks per game in the month of January. I think he continues to do what he's supposed to do. It just falls on, unfortunately, guys like Edgecombe, who's a rookie, or a guy like Grimes, who's been really up and down. He's only scored double figures in 3 games this month. That's concerning. It's just guys that you don't know how consistent they're going to be. If that's the case, Paul George then has to be consistent himself, but we don't really think he's at the point of his career where we can truly count on him. He's only averaging 15 points a game. He's still pretty effective, and he can get it done on a certain night, but I don't know. He's probably someone who gives me a lot of concern for the playoffs to come around. If they're in a series with, say, New York or, say, Boston, if Paul George is the third option, if VJ can't be the true third option, I think it's a lot of pressure, because I think these other teams that I just mentioned, Detroit's another one, not Detroit, Cleveland's another one. They have so many offensive weapons and ways they can score the ball. And if Paul George, if his 3 ball is not falling, and he's not really going to get a ton of isolation looks because Maxey's going to have the ball in his hands most of the time, as he should, I worry about what Paul George's offensive role in the team is. But luckily, defensively, this is what I said when we signed him. It's like, no matter how bad or good he plays, defensively, he'll always be an upgrade over Tobias. So at least on one end, you're getting something from Paul George. So I'm hoping that turns out and works out for the Sixers in the long run this season. Another thing I thought was interesting recently, so Kelly Oubre recently came back from injury a few weeks ago. Over the past 2 games, he's entered the starting lineup in Dominic Barlow's place. And I kind of like the idea of that. This is the starting lineup Sixers fans envisioned coming into the year: Maxey, VJ, Kelly, Paul George, and Embiid. And Barlow certainly earned the starting job for a while there, especially when Kelly was injured. But I think Barlow coming in off the bench and providing that energy as an offensive rebounder, as a defender, Barlow's kind of mirrored Paul George with his ability to kind of intercept those passes. Maybe he's not a great on-ball defender, but I think he's been very good at hopping into passing lanes. I think he kind of gives the Sixers an energy off the bench that maybe can help them, because Kelly's been scoring the ball really well since he got back. He's shooting the lights out from 3 recently, which is not something he's done pretty much his entire career. So I'm not going to just blindly assume this is the Kelly Oubre we get all season long, but I like the confidence he's playing with, especially coming back from an injury. I'm glad he's re-earned his spot in the starting lineup. And yesterday against the Knicks, I thought him and Embiid, I loved their connection 2 seasons ago. It seems like they're starting to get back to that, where Embiid found him a couple times, whether it was, I believe it was in the second quarter, Embiid had it in the high post. Oubre came in from the far corner, cut right to the basket, and Embiid found him with a one-handed pass. And then later in the game, Embiid found him in the paint right outside the restricted area. Kelly got fouled, finished with one hand, made the shot, and got the and one opportunity. So just, I like that we're starting to see that version of Kelly who plays off Embiid, moves off the ball so well. I think that's where he shines the most. If we're going to get a guy who can do that and make the 3 ball at a high level, that changes a lot for the Sixers. I'm not going to guarantee any sort of elite 3-point shooting from Kelly Oubre, even though it's been the case this month. I don't know if we can guarantee that. But if as long as he's continuing to mix up his offense and he doesn't get too complacent and assume the fact that he's going to make his 3 ball, if he's still mixing and matching his brand of offense and doing everything that he's capable of, like he did yesterday, like he did against Houston, then I think we're in for a very strong second half of the season from Kelly Oubre. So overall, the Sixers, they've been a lot of fun to watch. This is probably the most fun I've had watching them. Is certainly probably since I was in high school. I really liked the team that made the Eastern Finals with Ben Simmons and Seth Curry and that whole crew, but obviously that ended in disaster. But I think this is probably the most optimism and excitement I've had for a group of players on the Sixers in a long time. Even guys like Bona, Jabari Walker. I have fun watching those guys play hustle. So I'm hoping to see the Sixers continue on this trend. Hopefully they get back in the race for one of those top 4 seeds. Right now they're 6th, as I mentioned. I don't want to look too far ahead towards like the trade deadline. I might do a podcast next week kind of looking at where they kind of stack up against these other Eastern Conference teams. But for now, I just want to kind of see them start to stack wins and stop being in these super crazy competitive games. But as I kind of outlined, there's a couple of reasons that they are routinely in those close games, and it might continue. But they have a really easy stretch coming up. Charlotte, they're playing well. They're certainly playing well. Could give the Sixers trouble tomorrow. But then Milwaukee, Sacramento, and New Orleans. So I would like to see the Sixers 3-1 at least, maybe even 4-0 in that stretch. Please, let's just put some wins together, get back on track in the Eastern Conference. I think they're capable of doing that, especially if Embiid and Maxey are going to continue to play at the level they've been. But Maxey, I continue to kind of overlook him. It's kind of becoming kind of like where we were with Embiid 2-3 seasons ago, where you just expect him to be excellent. He's turned into one of the best guards in the league. He's an all-star starter for a reason. He was on a bit of a downward stretch. He shot 7-25 against Phoenix. That was probably the low point. But he just kind of looked really tired after he's been playing so many minutes this season. And now that Embiid is kind of starting to take some of the load off of him offensively, now that Kelly Oubre is back and playing big minutes again, it seems like the offense is coming back where they can kind of take some of that pressure off Maxey. And at least over these past 2 games, he's looked back to being himself. And his transformation into the defender he's been this year, where he's well over two steals plus blocks per game. He's in the all-defensive conversation too for me. I'd have to look closer at the league as a whole to see if he's really going to make one of those teams, but he has to be at least on the list of candidates. Really impressive to see the leap he's made this year, and I trust him to guide this team. He's also been getting better. Last thing I'll say here, he's been getting better in these clutch situations. In the first half of the season, really maybe even still now in certain games, Sixers do have a lot of trouble with their plays at the end of these games. It's been some ISO ball that hasn't really been successful. I don't think it's really Maxey's style, but in these last couple of games, they've been running a lot more 2-man action with Embiid and him at the end of games, also letting Maxey get downhill. He scored a huge basket in the Houston game. He scored a couple baskets in the Houston game late where they kind of just let him reset at the top of the key and then get downhill, use his speed to kind of blow by a defender. He scored one of them in the last couple minutes of the Rockets game, and then it also happened on that goaltend that should have won them the game, but it wasn't called, but that was another example of, in my opinion, them running a successful play for Maxey late in the game. So it seems like they're getting better with that. And if that's the case, if he's going to be more comfortable as a closer, I think the Sixers offense is only going to continue to get better. They have an 117 offensive rating on the season, so I don't think you can complain too much about that. So that's just kind of my check-in on the Sixers through the month of January. We're heading into All-Star trade deadline season. I'm really optimistic about where the Sixers are. I don't want to put too much pressure on them come playoff time, but I do think things are headed in the right direction, and Embiid's play especially makes me confident that things are headed in that right direction. So that's going to do it for this edition of Trust the Podcast. I just kind of wanted to talk about the team. So thank you very much for listening. Make sure to follow Trust the Podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts if you aren't already. Also go follow on TikTok and then follow on YouTube at Tuman Talking Sports, not just Trust the Podcast, but I am going to start putting every episode of Trust the Podcast on my YouTube channel. So make sure to follow Tuman Talking Sports on YouTube. But other than that, thank you so much for listening. Stay warm in all this crazy cold weather. Hope the Sixers continue to give us something to be happy about.